$170 billion to hire new border guards and immigration enforcement officers, as well as funding detention facilities. A stronger than expected U.S. jobs report on Thursday morning is giving a boost to U.S. markets. With 147,000 non-farm jobs added in June and unemployment easing 0.1% to 4.1%. The strength in hiring has analysts predicting the Federal Reserve will continue its wait-and-see approach to cutting rates.
Another deadline looms. This one for the countries targeted by Trump's reciprocal tariffs to get their deals done. Trump has announced the US has struck a trade deal with Vietnam, which includes a 20% tariff on exports to the US. It puts a much higher 40% levy on transshipments through third countries, aimed at products largely made in China and then labeled made in Vietnam. Negotiations are also underway for an agreement with India. The deadline for all trade deals is July 9th.
Record on the House floor. Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Imagine in America where everyone who works hard and plays by the rules can live the good life, afford to live the good life.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries just setting a new record for longest House speech as he delays a final vote on the president's signature legislation.
Good paying jobs, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. That's what House Democrats are fighting for.
Jeffries speaking for more than 8 hours against what supporters call the big beautiful bill that Democrats warn will strip health care and food assistance with its Medicaid changes, also arguing that other provisions will fail to deliver, for instance noting an income cap on the tax exemption for tips. House Speaker Mike Johnson just taking the floor.
I just want to say something that many of us learned when we were children. We were taught, it takes a lot longer to build a lie than to tell the simple truth.
Johnson says passing the bill will keep a promise to the American people. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett telling Fox.
It's the best, most beautiful tax bill in American history. There isn't even a second place that's close because it's going to create so many jobs. It's going to add $10,000 into the pockets of the typical American family. It's going to put millions and millions of more people to work.
He says the bill will supercharge the economy. It includes making permanent the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Once Johnson is finished speaking, they'll move on to the vote. We're just getting word that actor Michael Madsen has died, known for many roles, but perhaps best from Kill Bill and Reservoir Dogs. He was a favorite of director Quentin Tarantino. His manager just confirming he died unexpectedly. Michael Madsen was 66. America's listening to Fox News.
Listen to the all-new Bret Baier podcast featuring Common Ground, in-depth talks with lawmakers from opposite sides of the aisle, along with all your Bret Baier favorites like his all-star panel and much more. Available now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The U.S. Supreme Court will not revive a Montana law requiring parental consent for minors to have abortions.
A Montana law requiring parents give consent for their minor daughters to undergo abortions will remain stricken now that the U.S. Supreme Court is refusing to hear an appeal. Montana's own high court ruled last year the law ran afoul of the state's constitutional provisions protecting rights of minors, though the state's attorney general argued parental rights to make medical decisions for their children under federal law should outweigh the rights of minors. Montana voters enshrined abortion protections into their state constitution last year, a move made in response to the U.S. Supreme Court overturning its decision in Roe v. Wade. Evan Brown, Fox News.
The justices do agree to hear cases involving transgender athletes in girls' school sports. They will review lower court rulings in West Virginia and Idaho. The Fed chief facing a call to resign or be fired over a renovation.
Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte says Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell should be investigated investigated for his lack of detail about the $2.5 billion renovation to the Federal Reserve Building. At a hearing last week, Senate Banking Chair Tim Scott questioned the plans for a rooftop garden and water feature. Powell was defensive, but didn't offer details.
It's the same elevator it's been there since the building was built. So that's a mischaracterization. And some of those are no longer in the plans. That's earlier. The plans have continued to evolve.
Pulte's family is in the commercial housing sector, and he still has a financial stake. He has been urging for lower interest rates, but he's also said a $500 million renovation would be ridiculous, let alone one for $2.5 billion. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Stocks finish higher on a short day of trading ahead of the holiday weekend. The Dow up 344. The S&P and the Nasdaq both finishing at new highs. I'm Lisa Brady. This is Fox News.
Hey, I'm Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy podcast. I hope you will join me.
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
I'm Christina Parts-Nevelis, and this is your CNBC Tech Check briefing. Shares of TripAdvisor are surging over 15% after activist investor Starboard Value revealed a more than 9% stake in the online travel company. That means this position has a value of roughly $160 million. Shares of TripAdvisor, though, have been relatively flat since the start of the year after plummeting over 30% just last year in 2024. Last year as well, the company created a special committee to explore strategic alternatives to increase shareholder value. Apple iPhone sales in China rose in the second quarter for the first time in 2 years, this according to Counterpoint Research. The report comes as Apple has looked to turn around its business in one of its most critical markets. The last time Apple recorded growth in iPhones in China was the second quarter of 2023. Counterpoint attributing the growth to promotions in China as firms discounted the iPhone 16 models. Shares of Apple are slightly higher. Datadog shares are up double digits after it was announced the company would replace Juniper Networks in the S&P 500. The change is set to take effect on July 9. Datadog's addition is continuing a trend of adding more tech exposure to the index, with DoorDash being added back in March and Workday added in December. Before today's big move, Datadog had been underperforming the tech sector so far this year. That's all for today. See you back here next week.
This is DW News. These are our top stories. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has travelled to Denmark as the nation takes over the rotating EU presidency. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has promised to support Ukraine in obtaining EU membership. President Zelensky reiterated the importance for his country of strengthening ties with the EU and NATO amid uncertain US support. Russia's defense ministry has confirmed the death of top general Mikhail Gudkov. The deputy navy chief is reported to have died in a Ukrainian airstrike in Russia's Kursk region. He's one of the most senior members of the Russian military to be killed in the war against Ukraine. Football fans are mourning the loss of Diogo Jota, who died in a car crash along with his brother Andre in Spain. Authorities say a tyre blew out while their car was overtaking another vehicle. Jota played for English club Liverpool and Portugal's national team. His death comes less than 2 weeks after his wedding. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find more on our website, dw.com.
OpenAI disavowed online broker Robinhood's sale of OpenAI tokens. Perplexity joined Anthropic and OpenAI in offering a $200 per month subscription. And if you're wondering how to watch Summer Games Done Quick 2025, we've got the answer for you. It's Thursday, July 3rd, and here's a quick look at tech in the news this morning from Engadget. OpenAI has condemned online brokerage firm Robinhood's sale of OpenAI tokens, saying they will not give consumers stock in the company. In a social media post, the company said, "We did not partner with Robinhood. We are not involved in this and do not endorse it," adding that the tokens are not equity and that it did not give approval for any transfer. The statement addressed a recent move by Robinhood to provide European investors access to what it calls a limited stock token on OpenAI and SpaceX. Robinhood said in its own social media missive that these tokens give retail investors indirect exposure to private markets, opening up access, and are enabled by Robinhood's ownership stake in a special purpose vehicle. So, what is a special purpose vehicle? Robinhood is suggesting that it owns private shares in OpenAI that it keeps in a separate company, the SPV, to isolate risk. So it's offering investors a chance to buy tokens, or shares basically, in that private SPV, and thus indirectly gain access to OpenAI's private shares that are not available to retail investors. Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev wrote in a social media post, "They are not technically equity, but the tokens effectively give retail investors exposure to these private assets." Now, such SPVs are fairly common, as TechCrunch pointed out, but OpenAI still is not happy with Robinhood's tokens. Now, if you are an eligible investor thinking of jumping in, keep in mind that SPVs can be overpriced compared to the underlying private stock. In addition, OpenAI has an outrageous valuation compared to its earnings and has yet to show how it will achieve its sky-high $125 billion revenue forecast by 2029. Well, you can add perplexity to the growing list of AI companies offering $200 plus per month subscription plans to users who want unlimited access to their most advanced products and tools. As of this week, Perplexity Max is available on iOS and the web. The subscription comes with unlimited monthly usage of Labs, the agentic creation tool Perplexity released this past May. People can use Labs to generate spreadsheets, presentations, web applications, and more. Perplexity is also promising early access to new features, including Comet, a new web browser the company claims will be a powerful thought partner for everything you do on the web. The company adds Max subscribers will receive priority customer support, as well as access to top frontier models from partners like Anthropic and OpenAI. Perplexity will continue to offer its existing Pro plan, which remains $20 per month. Admittedly, the company is courting a small demographic with the new subscription, noting it's primarily designed for content designers, business strategists, and academic research. OpenAI was the first to open the floodgates of very expensive AI subscriptions when it began offering its ChatGPT Pro plan at the end of last year. Since then, Anthropic and Google have followed suit. In a mad world, speedruns for charity can be a calm oasis. Summer Games Done Quick has your fix with the 2025 edition of the marathon. You can tune in starting on Sunday. And as usual, the lineup includes loads of fun games and bonkers challenges. It seems fitting that this year's lineup includes a Switch 2 game. On the event's last day, one particular speedrunner will take on Mario Kart World on the new console. And perhaps to commemorate the new console's launch, Nintendo is everywhere at this event. There are 3 Zelda games on tap: Majora's Mask, Phantom Hourglass, and Link's Awakening. The company's plumber mascot is peppered all over the place as well. You'll find Mario Kart Super Circuit, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Paint, and the Super Mario World Hack. Sayonara Mario World 2, not done yet. There's also Super Mario Maker 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Super Mario 64. And there's plenty of non-Nintendo stuff too. The week kicks off with a run of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. One of Engadget's all-time favorites, Balatro, has a run scheduled on July 11th. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle makes an appearance, and 2 speed-running legends will try to beat Cuphead during an allotted 35 minutes. Now, anyone who can finish that bloodbath in less than that should be named the leader of the free world. The event will raise funds for Doctors Without Borders. The humanitarian nonprofit has a legion of nearly 63,000 medical personnel. It offers clinical and humanitarian care in over 70 countries. Last year's event raised $2.5 million. To date, Games Done Quick Events have raised over $50 million for a charity. SGDQ 2025 runs from July 6th, which is Sunday, through the 13th. Now, if you are in or near Minneapolis, you can register to attend in person. Otherwise, you can stream the festivities on the SGDQ Twitch channel, and I've put a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for listening. There's more to these stories and more tech news at Engadget.com. This episode featured journalism from Steve Dent, Igor Bonifasic, and Will Shanklin, and was voiced and produced from the sound studios of Spoken Layer by me, Steve White. Enjoy your extended holiday weekend. I will be back on Monday morning.
Hey, it's Jen Lehner at jenlehner.com, and this is your Front Row Entrepreneur Flash Briefing for Thursday, July the 3rd. Meta is giving brands more ways to reach you inside WhatsApp. They just announced new AI-powered ad tools for the app's messaging system. You'll now see sponsored messages based on your activity, along with chatbot integrations for everything from customer service to product suggestions. For small business owners using WhatsApp Business, this opens the door to more personalized outreach and automation. Threads has started adding trending topic markers to boost post engagement. Posts related to popular topics now show a little flame icon and text indicating that it's trending. It's designed to help you join bigger conversations and gives your content more visibility when it aligns with viral themes. And over on X, community notes are now open to AI bot contributors, meaning AI bots can now help suggest community notes, but they still require approval from human moderators. It's a new hybrid model supposedly designed to keep content in check while expanding moderation tools. As you plan your content for tomorrow, keep in mind that it's U.S. Independence Day, Sidewalk Egg Frying Day, and Alice in Wonderland Day. And trending all across social media right this very second is hashtag Thursday Thoughts, hashtag Thursday Vibes, and hashtag National Chocolate Wafer Day. Oh, and also hashtag International Plastic Bag Free Day. And I wanted to make sure and let you know that I just published a new podcast episode. It's called Automate Everything, Demystifying AI Agents with Jacob Bank. Jacob Bank is the founder and CEO of this amazing new app I discovered called, or at least new to me, called Relay.app. And it's a no-code platform that lets you build your own AI agents, even if you've never written a line of code. And Jacob shares exactly how he uses 40-plus AI agents to run really his entire business: marketing, support, sales, finance, and even more. This is one of those episodes that you're going to want to return to whenever you're ready to take your business automation to the next level. It's that good. Just go to jenlehner.com/097. That's JENLEHNER.com/097 to listen, or you can listen anywhere you get your podcasts. The podcast is the Front Row Podcast for Entrepreneurs. And that's it for today's Flash Briefing. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.
Ever feel like you're drowning in admin work while your patients wait? You're not alone. Many healthcare practices, especially in aesthetics, are turning to AI to save time and boost productivity. The best part, you don't need a tech giant's budget to make it work. Take ChatGPT, for example. It's not just for writing blog posts. It can draft patient emails, answer FAQs, even help with treatment descriptions, and it's free to start. HubSpot's CRM, Customer Relationship Management System, perfect for tracking patient leads without messy spreadsheets. Here's your quick tip. Try Grammarly today. Install the browser extension and let it polish your patient communications in real time. No more second-guessing that email to a referral partner. AI isn't magic, it's just a smart tool. And your practice deserves smart tools. I'm Dr. Terry Fisher. Go automate something.
Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Thursday, July 3rd. I'm Katie Dayton for the Wall Street Journal. A hybrid electric airplane startup promises to solve a host of issues with flying, including long runways and loud takeoffs. We speak to its CEO about how he plans to do it. Then, we're checking in on the international AI race, where Chinese companies are hot on the heels of their American counterparts. But first, if you've ever dreamed of owning a jetpack, a Virginia-based startup called Electra is engineering what it thinks could be the next best thing. A small plane that can take off and land more like a helicopter, but without the noise or downdraft. Electra has backing from Lockheed Martin and expects to have its EL-9 planes flying in the sky in 2029. We're here with the company's CEO, Mark Allen, to learn about how it's going to work. Mark, so in our story, we have these wonderful visuals of your plane taking off and landing. Unfortunately, we don't have that visual medium here. Mark, could you explain to listeners what a takeoff and landing looks like in an Electra plane?
When you watch an airplane take off, you expect to see it make its way down the runway, build speed, and then jump up in the air. This airplane just skips those first two steps. It just jumps straight up in the air, just as quickly as it starts moving, literally less than 3 seconds.
And I think most people would imagine that that looks like a helicopter in that case. What's the difference here?
It ends up operating in the exact same profile as a helicopter, but it's just a plane. You can tell because from the minute it leaps in the air, it's wing-borne. It's not fighting to go straight up with rotor blades spinning hard and beating all that air down, creating downwash, creating noise. It just whisper quiet. It just happens to land like a helicopter.
I wondered, what kind of pitfalls did you stumble upon in development of the plane? Was there anything major that you had to readjust once you started building and flying these things?
It's a super difficult problem to solve, to fly slowly with total stability and control. It's been solved through the flight physics work around the aerostructure. It's been solved through the algorithms that are part of the flight control computer or the flight management system. And so the computer is doing a lot of hard work to make it super simple for the pilot to fly.
So it's more like a Tesla kind of screen that we're seeing ahead of the pilot, as opposed to all of those buttons and dials that none of us understand if we don't fly planes.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. It presents very differently. In aviation, we call it the six-pack. There are these 6 principal dials that have been the very core of the airplane cockpit interface for the pilot for generations.
If this plane entered the market right now, what would the commercial proposition be for consumers and for airlines too?
We have a 2,200 plus backlog of provisional orders, which is some $13 billion in sales value. And the customers that are buying it are going to use it for a lot of different things. So, for example, one right now flies 9-seaters on short routes across the Northeast corridor. But it has to wait on the runway for 15, 20 minutes before it can take off, and it burns fuel the whole time. Our airplane will use the helicopter departure, and then it'll fly those short 20, 30-minute routes, and it'll thereby reduce the operating cost by about 40% for that customer. But we have another customer who flies very small jets, and they're starting to get prohibited from flying into certain airports that are shutting down to noise, places like Santa Monica. And there are a lot of other communities out there that are also having fights about airport noise. They're buying our airplane so that they can offer the community a way to stay connected, to move passengers and cargo, but to do it totally quietly. And then a third customer lives and operates down in the islands, and they move goods and people between different islands. There are some they simply can't fly into because the runways are too short.
So you're solving for a lot of things here. Having to travel to the airport, having to get through the airport, noisy, sometimes scary takeoffs. Why hasn't this been done before?
There were a number of small, light jets that tried to do this 25, 30 years ago. But we finally brought a number of overlapping, intersecting aviation technologies together to do something that you just couldn't have done 10 years ago. It's hard, it's really hard to be able to have the level of stability and control at super slow speeds that we've achieved. But now, with all the advances in electric vehicles that are out there around the world, there's a ton of great learning. Batteries, they continue to advance. The ability to use sophisticated algorithms for the flight control system I described earlier, those also are unlocked by the ways in which compute is so radically advancing these days. The whole tech stack is growing together, and the best innovation happens when you intersect different parts of that advancing tech stack to do something that's just unheard of.
That was Mark Allen, the CEO of aerospace startup Electra. And you can see a demonstration of Electra's plane on WSJ.com. We've added a link in the show notes. Coming up, you've heard of OpenAI and Anthropic. But what about AI from Baidu and DeepSeek? Chinese companies are gaining ground on their American rivals. Find out how they're competing after the break. If you live in the US, it can seem like our homegrown companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, are the big names on campus when it comes to generative AI. And they were, until Chinese companies entered the picture. In Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, users ranging from multinational banks to public universities are turning to large language models from Chinese companies, putting American superiority at risk. WSJ reporter and editor Lisa Lin has been following the competition. So, Lisa, if we were looking at China and America as two cars in a race over the last few years, who has been in the lead, and when did that gap start closing up?
With generative AI, you just have to go back to the end of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, and it really changed the game. At that point, OpenAI and ChatGPT in the realm of generative AI was way ahead of the Chinese. After ChatGPT came up, a Chinese rival called Baidu was quickly out of the door with a new generative AI model. But at that point, the Chinese lagged very firmly and very much behind the US. However, fast forward to the start of this year in January, when a Chinese company called DeepSeek unveiled its latest generative AI model, you've really noticed like a huge improvement, and the Chinese models have just since then been going from strength to strength. Some of them are leading benchmarks, and others are just displaying performances just not very far from their Western peers.
You mentioned in your reporting that some big household names like HSBC, Standard Chartered, they're testing these Chinese models. What is it that Chinese AI firms are doing differently to American counterparts that's been so compelling for these companies?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I have to say that the US products are still in the lead. If you look at the use of ChatGPT, for example, it's way and by far the most used generative AI app in the world. However, the one big realization from the introduction of DeepSeek at the start of the year was that DeepSeek was able to match the benchmarks of its Western rivals, or come close at least, and do it at a fraction of the computing power and the cost that was required. So this is actually super attractive to countries in, for example, Latin America, or countries in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, who might not have the computing resources or the financial resources to deploy on ChatGPT or Gemini or the US equivalents. Because ChatGPT and Gemini, a lot of these models are closed source, and that means they charge a premium for the product. What the Chinese have done is not only have they been able to train their models more efficiently and on less compute, meaning less cost, they've also made their models open source. And when they make their models open source, it's very easy for a developer in any part of the world to create their own AI agents on it.
And I wonder, what has been going on behind the scenes geopolitically that's led to this outcome that we're looking at today? How much of a hand have the US and Chinese governments had?
So the reason why this US-China AI rivalry is watched so closely is because the backdrop to all of this was in late 2022, probably about the same time when ChatGPT was released, the US government imposed export controls on China. And at that point, they blocked the sale of advanced chips and chip-making technology to the country. And all this was done in the name of national security. And since then, the Chinese government has really doubled down on an internal effort to create its own domestic Chinese supply chains, not just for chips, but for AI models, so that they can be independent of the US, the West, and its products.
And aside from simply losing market share, what concerns do major American figures have with AI from China gaining dominance and Chinese AI maybe getting more integrated into our lives in the West?
The biggest concern is censorship, and the idea that the tech we use isn't agnostic. The tech we use actually carries the values of their founders or their developers, and in this case, Chinese generative AI might carry the viewpoints of the Chinese Communist Party. We've tested DeepSeek's app at the journal, and it's shown that the answers do carry a certain bias. This, however, doesn't really apply to open weights.
Open weights, meaning basically when the parameters used by AI are open source. How does that factor in here?
So when you open source your models, just the way that DeepSeek, Alibaba, and Baidu have, and what developers are taking are the open weights and not just using the consumer product development